Welcome, one and all, to SALEStrainer Online. We are discussing today an issue that is very important to me. Of that, I can give you every conceivable reason to be paying attention to this presentation. Online professional real estate training, by far and away the subject that is most dear to my heart, and that is one of fee negotiation. So I do have a caveat on there about the copyright of the technique, dialogue, and the concepts that we're about to share with you, because this is by far and away a subject that will translate, if you allow it to basically, some of the stuff that I talk about in here, I can honestly say to you, has meant millions of dollars. I can tell you that when you are negotiating fee, you are probably at your highest earning capacity. And quite often, salespeople will say to me, how is it that you were able, so my fee, I'm not afraid to say it here, it is a history thing, was 3%, never discounted a fee, not ever at the point of listing, and to go further, not even at the point of sale, aside from the odd occasion where I did it for nothing, for reasons I won't go into here because it's not relevant. But fee negotiation is by far and away the single largest important issue that confronts you, because your earning capacity is either limited or it is magnified by your ability to negotiate that fee. And can I say to you, and this is why I start with this, and it's the most important thing that I can share with you here, it is basically a choice. You can sell value as a sales professional. So as I say, in the absence of value, cost becomes an issue. Or you can, wherever value is present, cost is never an issue. And you can make that choice to add value or discount. Now, can I share this with you very, very quickly? It takes no intelligence whatsoever to discount. Any idiot, and you can see our friend here is probably not representing the highest of IQs there, can lower price or give money away. It does take intelligence to figure out a value-added proposition where people can see real value, and wherever value is present, cost is never an issue. So we want to work on this around what I call a professional capacity cycle. Now, I see a lot of people, they'll hear, even maybe for some of you here today, you'll hear me use some fee negotiation techniques, and you might find yourself saying, gee, that's pretty good. I could never say it like that. Or worse, you could just lock on to the words, then try and use those words and find yourself coming up short. You see, there's a cycle to you developing your professional capacity in terms of your skills and knowledge, and then of course your training so that they become internalized. Do not mistake for what might seem here today as spontaneity. Do not mistake it for spontaneity. Instead, understand that it's years of going through the process of this particular cycle. You see, everything starts and ends, in my opinion, with your psychological disposition on the subject. In this instance, we're talking about your ability to negotiate fee. Now, in terms of where I stand on this, I say that your professional capacity begins with you being robust. So often you'll hear me say that listing properties for a start stems from enthusiasm, but above all, confidence, your confidence within yourself. And confidence stems from your psychological disposition. So we need to understand the psychology, we need to understand the principles that underpin consignment selling. And it's a very important point that I'm making here. We sell by way of consignment. So that means we don't pay for the article. There's no vested interest in the article aside from the marketing and that sort of thing. The article is owned by the property seller. And it's our job to improve the value of that, in my opinion, by at least our fee. We'll come back to that. Once the psychological disposition is sorted, you then move to the practicality. You see, as I said to you a moment ago, the words, the dialogue, the format, the techniques that you use are pretty useless if they're not underpinned by the psych. But of course, we have to come up with the words, but they are tied in together. Then, of course, that practical application, once it actually has success out there, once you start not having to discount your fee, some of you might even consider putting your fee up when you understand the power that sits behind it. You then have the proof, the evidence, if you like. And this is where the cycle itself is formulated, because the proof in turn makes the psychological disposition more robust. And as your psychological disposition becomes more robust, your ability to practically explain and your confidence that sits behind that explanation is superior. And again, I just want to reiterate, if we go back to the first slide, fee negotiation is a choice. You just have to start pretty much by thinking about where you want to head. So I say that in restructuring your belief, you have to start to look at it a different way. So often we hear salespeople fearing the question of what do you charge? Well, I hope that by the time you finish this short presentation that you revisit time and time again, that you start to look at yourself as a sales professional that literally and practically earns the fee. You see, I've always sought to make it my responsibility to improve the sale value of the property by at least my fee. So when we look at restructuring your belief, it's often we hear about brainwashing. Well, I reckon, as it says there, every now and then your brain pretty much needs a good wash. And let's have a look at how we can create that wash. So I say the first thing we should do is win listings by doing whatever it takes, not at all costs. You see, coming back to the beginning again, it's easy to give away money. And so often it seems like the easy option to surrender that to the owner. But if you look at one of the things I talk about in listing properties for sale, I say that every problem that occurs inside of a real estate transaction typically emanates from the listing presentation. If you win that listing, as you may have heard me say before, on price, it'll probably come back to haunt you. Certainly in this instance, if you win that listing on fee, I can almost guarantee you in turn that that too will come back to haunt you. So understand that when you're giving away fee, when you're giving away the incentive, when you are discounting the fee, you are discounting the service, you're discounting your mentality, and all of the problems that occur inside of real estate businesses, inside of real estate sales functions, inside of the functionality or inside of a listing transaction, emanate from scarcity. And scarcity too turns or can cause you to want to give discounts away. So we say we're going to focus here on restructuring our beliefs. We're going to win listings by doing whatever it takes to add value and not by giving money away. So the next question that might be asked is this: why receive a fee at all? You really got to overcome this guilt factor. So often some sellers try to put a guilt trip on agents by saying that we get paid too much or that we receive too much. But you see, it's never too much if the client gets what they want. So one of my favorite techniques, and we're going to move into some practicality here, is to say to an owner, look, if I get you, if you receive what you want, can I have what I want? You see, I don't see that you're taking a risk because I don't get paid until you approve of what it is that you receive. So you are always in control of the transaction. Another way of looking at this, a seller might say to you, is your fee negotiable? I say, well, look, to be perfectly honest with you, the fee is negotiable for the life of the listing because you are in the driver's seat for the life of the listing. And whether or not I receive that fee at all is largely governed by you and your satisfaction with what I do. You see, until you approve of what you receive, I get the inside of a donut. So we need to overcome that guilt in understanding that we take the risk as much as the seller takes the risk on the selection of agent. You see, you could sell the property at market value, and that market value could exceed comparative value. So essentially you've done the job, but even then the owner decides not to sell for reasons of their own and you don't get paid. We really have to overcome this guilt. The second one is, and I hear this quite often, is when a seller might say to an agent, look, nothing is better, something is better than nothing, I should say. They'll say that, you know, isn't it better that you get something rather than nothing? But to me, that's the law of precedence. And if you're not careful, if you keep accepting something, inevitably you'll end up with nothing because it just becomes a race to the bottom. Once you get into the discount scourge, where does it end? And so often I see agents when I talk to them about their fee, and they might say, from time to time, we negotiate it to X amount or we discount it to X amount. And I'll say, how often do you do that? And they severely underestimate just how often they do it, because as salespeople, we will generally take the path of least resistance. Now, I'm not saying initially that defending your fee and refraining from discounting is going to be a harder road than just giving away the money. But one thing I do know is that it's a more prosperous road. Negotiating, importantly, is not discounting. We need to be careful with this. You know, one of my cheekiest lines, again, moving into the practicality, if you like, is when somebody says to me, is your fee negotiable? My immediate response to that is, oh, no, I don't want any more. So I don't suggest, you know, when they start to use the words negotiating, is your fee negotiable? I say, well, look, for your protection, my fee has been written up at 3%, because if it were negotiable, and I'm a hell of a negotiator, you could end up paying 4 or 5. So just for your protection, I've pre-written it in up at 3%. Just understand, and I don't understand this, why do people think when we talk about negotiation, there's always a downward pressure? To my mind, when you start to negotiate as a professional negotiator, that means upward. For whoever I'm representing, and in this instance, I might be representing my company and looking to protect my fee. So if somebody says it's negotiable, I'm thinking in terms of how do I negotiate it in an upward fashion. Let's face it, discounting is desperation. We just have to accept this. Nobody gives away their fee willingly. Not ever, and not under any circumstances. Or not under any circumstance. Yeah? So I say that discounting is for desperate people. Now you'll see how I fly this out, again in a practical explanation, particularly when someone says to me, we want to use you as an agent. But we've had another agent in and their fee has been discounted by 0.5%. If you'll match that fee, I'll run with you. Now, my first line to somebody that says that, I say, well, look, it sounds to me like you've decided I'm the better agent. They say, well, how? I say, well, by virtue of the fact that we're having this conversation at all, and you're saying to me, if I match that fee, you'll give it to me. You're telling me that I'm the better agent. Is that right? I said, yeah. Okay. So can I ask you something about this other agent? If they could command my fee at the rate it is, which is 0.5% higher, would they? Now, typically, the seller will then say, well, I imagine so. If they don't, I just repeat it. Surely, if they could command a fee like mine, they would. Because nobody would want to give away part of what they receive as a reward for no reason at all, surely. Yep. So can you accept that it's the only way they know how to win the business, by discounting? Yep. And I say, so can that also mean that they are perhaps a little desperate for the listing, given that because if they could and would command the same fee as I, the question must be, Mr. Seller, why don't they? Could it be that they are desperate? Could it be that that's the only way they see that they can win the business? Now they'll say, yeah, well, that could be the case. They want to win it. I say, look, in a negotiable situation, and you must understand this, we will be negotiating on your behalf. In a negotiable situation, what type of person do you want representing you? A desperate person who's likely to go on and further discount? Or do you want someone who sees it as a responsibility to uplift the value that they're returning to you? Yeah. So they say, well, that. I say, okay, so that would be me. So you would want me to do everything in my power to prevent you from listing your property with somebody or an agent that's desperate. They say, yeah. So how about I just don't you to talk about this person anymore? Let's be honest. The only reason agents discount fee, it's a last lunge to win the business. It's also dangerous. Can I explain this? I mean, it's dangerous for the owner because once you start to discount the fee, you are now moving closer to having to sell the property to retain position rather than for value, rather than selling to increase or improve market value beyond comparison. Because now it's about having to get the transaction done. And I understand all the bits and pieces and the arguments that people may put forward, but I honestly believe that it's commercially reckless for us to just discount a fee without allowing the seller to be fully aware of all of the pitfalls that might follow that. So I say, do active property sellers seek market value beyond comparison, or are they really looking at comparative value, saying, really assuming that every agent gets the same amount of money for the property, which is just not true, because market value can be above or below comparative value, largely dependent upon the agent that's representing that particular seller. So I say to a seller, what is it that you want? Do you want market value beyond compare? They say, yes, I do. Well, in that instance, that would mean that you receive the lion's share of the money that comes through, the big amount, for want of a better word, and I receive the small amount. Now, the small amount I receive is insignificant to the big amount that you want. Why are you so focused on the small stuff? Why don't you pay more attention to what you get? And again, I recap that, because if I get you, if we get what you want, surely you'd be okay with me having what I want. So sales professionals achieve and deliver outstanding results. They don't focus purely on transaction and giving money away. And this is a very important factor as we now move into understanding in a psychological disposition and then a practical application what fee structure is all about. Now, I say imagination is far more important than knowledge. As a salesperson, I always focus on what could be rather than what is. When people talk about comparative value, and our industry seems to have an obsession with this, I prefer, more importantly, to focus on market value and how that can be leveraged beyond compare. And I believe that in most instances, particularly in residential real estate, decisions are based largely upon emotions of people feeling the home. And then the price or the value they see is not ignored, but it is secondary. And the only limitation that a buyer will have once they've found the home that they want is their capacity to buy it. And I believe as an agent, it's our job to stretch that as far as we can. So to me, it's more important to be focused on imaginatively how you can get them there than focusing on the fact that the comparatives are saying that this is all the property is maybe worth. And then the big question as it gets around fee, and I know that we're at this juncture fairly quickly, is this: is fee negotiation worth learning? Well, in my opinion, it is, because your earning capacity is largely improved. If you've got a fee, just using numbers, I know that this is probably pie in the sky stuff these days, But if you're an agent at 3% and your competitors are at 2%, it's just simple mathematics. You only have to sell 2 properties to their 3 to be in a better disposition than they are. So your earning capacity is largely increased. So the question I ask you to ask of yourself, is it worth learning how to defend and leverage fee? And of course, the answer to that is yes. So here's some little simple principles I'd like you to adopt and just get these in your head and make sure that these come out in your dialogue all the time. First up, we earn a fee, we don't charge it. So when a seller says to you, what do you charge? You might look at them the way that I do and I say, nothing. I haven't charged a fee in 30 years. In fact, every last fee that I've ever accepted has been one that's been earned. You see, I see it as my job to add value to this transaction by at least my fee, but in many instances, I've added value beyond my fee, and value has been derived by focusing on how it is that I can explore the possibilities and leverage the value of your property beyond comparative price, beyond compare. The second thing we need to understand is it's a percentage-based partnership. You see, I say to a seller, the more I get for you, the more you get. So instead of you looking at my fee and saying, how do I pay you less? You should be saying to yourself, how do I pay you more? Because the more you pay me, the more you receive. Quite often I've said to sellers, I said, look, I own 3% of your property. I know that sounds a little uncomfortable for me to say that, but I have a vested interest in the outcome of this as much as you do. And I know you might say that's only marginal, but I beg to differ because I do this as transactions and this is my everyday earning capacity. And it's a partnership. It's not about you versus me versus the buyers. It's you and I versus the buyers. So what I like to look at inside of this is not how we can take from one another, not how I can get you down on what you're hoping to receive for the property, not how you can get me down to take less, more about, I know what you want, you now know what I want, let's figure out how we get that value or we derive that value from the buyer of the property. It really is risk-free selling. And I made this point a little bit earlier, I just want to expand on it, but when a seller puts me under attack and says, how much do I have to pay you? Particularly at the listing presentation, I say, well, nothing at this point in time. In fact, all you're really setting up right now is an incentive for me to sell. And as crazy as it might seem to you, I know that you feel like you're taking a risk on the real estate agent, but I'm taking as much of a risk on you. You could change your mind about selling at any given time and I receive nothing, no matter how long I've worked on it, no matter how much time I've invested in it. And that's okay, but that's factored into the risk when I put the fee up there. So I need you to understand that we're both taking a risk on each other. And that's why for some of you, sometimes it might seem that the fee seems a little higher, but it has to compensate for all of the times when sellers might change their mind or they might withdraw the property from the market. Now, this is so important. At the listing, you need to sell the fact that it is an incentive. So one of my favorite techniques is saying to them, look, if you had a racehorse and you went down to the racehorse, let's say its name was Mr. Ed, and obviously Mr. Ed can talk, and there's a major race meeting about to occur. And as you go down to see Mr. Ed, as you can see here, you have a small carrot or a large carrot. And you grab one of each. As you're discussing the race with Mr. Ed, which of the 2 carrots do you present to the horse with the idea of him winning? And of course they look at you and they say, well, the big carrot. Okay. And I say, why the big carrot? And they look at me and I say, is it because you want him to win? They say yes. So my guess is if you were going to withdraw that big carrot, you would only discuss that, talk about that, or make that decision after the race had been run. Because if Mr. Ed won the race, surely you'd be okay with the big carrot. They say, yeah. And if he didn't, you might withdraw that and only offer the small, or worse, you might send Mr. Ed to the knackery. Yep, I get that. So in any event, that decision is made at the point of listing. At this point in time, you're setting the incentive. I'm about to run a race for you. It's called the real estate race. Which carrot should you be dangling in front of me at this point in time? And that makes perfect sense. It's obviously the big carrot. You see, it's all about being fair. And this is the question I run past sellers. I say, what's fair here? It's about a fair go. Now, I know the fee might seem high, but in terms or in the realms of the amount of money that you're going to receive for the property, it's a small amount. And as crazy as it might seem, it's the only industry, it's the only professional service that I can share with you where you only pay if the service is performed, and if it's not, you do not. So I think you're getting a fair go, and given that even at that point of sale, you still have the power to negotiate. So why are we having this conversation at all? What we need to do is incentivize it heavily. You need to give me a fair go at it, and at the point of sale, it's that point that we discuss whether or not the fee is over the top or in between. So in Demeanour Technique, you can see when I'm running this, you can see, if you're looking at my eyes, which is hard to do with these goggles on, that you can see that I am totally psychologically resolved to the fact that I do add value. So in Demeanour Technique, when this question comes up, how much do you charge? I don't take that as a front. In fact, my initial reaction is to say, is that just merely an inquiry? And so often, given that my confidence and enthusiasm is high, and I've had this discussion with many of our real estate rock stars and their performance out there in the field, they'll say that the fee rarely seems to come up. And I say that's because your enthusiasm and your technique and your representation of value prior to getting to the point of fee being discussed has been so good that it's really not an issue. Yeah, so for me, and the thing I encourage for you, is to try to get the value proposition out front first. And the only time the fee comes up is when you're signing off on the agency agreement, and if the value has been present all the way through, it won't really come up. So sometimes it's just merely an inquiry. From time to time, it might be a discount request. If it is indeed a discount request, the first thing I want to check for is what is that tied to? Because quite often, innocently, it can just be that they are financially pressed. Having said that, I just remove it and I say, look, well, it's not about whether or not the fee is negotiable, it's when it should be negotiable. So I go back to that racehorse analogy, or I go back to the fact that if there is to be any negotiation, it should be at the point of sale. And as I've said to you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, the fee is negotiable for the life of the listing. So when we get to the point of sale, I'm happy, I'm okay with you saying to me, I would sell at that price if the fee was X amount of dollars less. And all I ask for at that point is the opportunity to go back to the buyer and get that on top and maybe even more, so that again, you get what you want, and then hopefully you'll be happy with me getting what I want. Or it could be an attack. Now, look, from time to time, you come across people with what I refer to as a rigid discount mentality. It's those ones that will quite often say to you, I've never paid full price for anything in my life. Or the chest beaters that fancy themselves as negotiators, and their idea of a negotiator is someone that always gets something cheap. That's not a great negotiator, because a great negotiator wants all parties to feel satisfied with the result. So when I talk about demeanor and technique, when I'm receiving those questions, I'm asking which of those ones are first, but I'm very, very focused on maintaining in my demeanor all of these facets that you're seeing there. I remain relaxed. To me, when somebody comes at me on fee, I don't panic. I say in my head, hang on, they don't know what they don't know yet. And then I move into explaining it. I maintain eye contact. The most important thing is that you are looking directly at these people, because the eyes reinforce everything that is said. I lean forward from time to time. Most of you will know that in technique, if I want somebody to say yes to something, I nod. These have just become fairly straight things. I show an extraordinary passion for this. I'm very dismissive of people that discount because I believe they haven't taken the time to really understand the business and how it works. I demonstrate passion, humor. I'll lighten up, you know. I acknowledge, I'm very courteous. Surely you're seeing, even in the techniques that I've run, questions, I make statements, commands, and nail and sequence. So to me, it's just about composing yourself and moving through that. So when somebody says, you know, I would, as I mentioned before, I would run with you if you charge the same as the owner. I just look at them and say, and acknowledge it. Hang on. So does that mean that you consider me to be the best agent? So that's when I'm asking questions and they say yes. So by virtue of the fact that we're having this conversation at all, I'm the agent you want. There's a statement. And we move through that fairly comfortably. And in terms of negotiating itself, understand the fundamentals that underpin it. So when somebody says to me they want a discount, and I'll say, well, what were you hoping for? And they say the agent down the road was your 3%, they're 2.5%. I go, 2.5%? I mean, that's just never happened. Look, I must tell you this. There is not one client I have on board at this point in time that's ever received a discount on percentage. You see, so I would never do that to you. You would never be able to find someone that's received a better deal than you. So I wouldn't do it to you, but I cannot do it for you. So that starts with flinch. And I understand the first offer is never the last. Most people will try. It's the same with buyers when they offer a price. Even the ones that snap their hands and say, that's a one offer, one time only. It's the same with a fee. So if they ask for a discount, that's most often a starting point and you have to move into it. So when I'm asked for a fee, when I'm asked inside a negotiation, I ask for more than I really want. So if people say to me, is your fee negotiable? I don't go, yeah. I say, oh, no, I don't want any more. And they say, well, how much is it? I say, 4%. And I watch their faces. I say, that freaked you out a little bit? Yeah. Well, it's not actually. For your protection, it's been set at 3%. So I'll ask for more than I really want. I don't fear this. I understand that negotiation is a skill. And as a skilled negotiator, I understand how this is rolling out. Quid pro quo simply means something for something. So if somebody asks for something in a negotiation, you ask for something in return. So if a person says to me, is your fee negotiable? I'll say, well, look, it is for the life of the listing, but at the point of sale, at this point in time, we're setting the incentive, and that needs to be fairly rigid. So they've asked for something, I've granted that, and in return, I've given something back. I maintain silence. You see, so much of what we do is about how somebody reacts to the scenario rather than focusing on being argumentative. So if somebody says to me, what's your fee? I'll say, or if they say, do I charge? I say nothing. But if they say, what is it? I'll say 3%. And I just remain silent until I get a reaction. Because if I get no reaction, then there's no problem. I answer a question with a question. I don't think I need to explain that. I never express in absolutes. I never say never. It's the same as when I'm negotiating a price. So if somebody says your fee negotiable, I say, well, look, it is for the life of the listing, but I don't want any more. I'm just throwing that ball in the air. And I say, look, why are we discussing this? Because the race hasn't been run. Again, if I get you what you want, can I have what I want? And they say, well, how do we know that's going to be sure? So we don't. Neither of us know, because we're dealing with market value and it's based on so many variables that we have to confront moving in. There is always a preparedness to walk. If I meet someone with a rigid discount mentality, because I have abundance, to be fair, I will walk. And because they know that, that changes the whole perception. I'm reminded of a time that I went into a listing presentation and a chap was on the phone and he was arguing with someone about price with something, and I was unfolding it, and then he got off the phone and he said, look, I just want to know how much it is. I'm not paying full fee and I refuse to pay for marketing. And then his phone rang again. He got on it again. And I just got up and started to pack my gear up. And he looked at me and I said, look, sir, I'm just not for you. I mean, if you want to explore it and then make those decisions, that's fine. But to begin with that up front, I just don't think our product's for you. He then started to try and sell me because I took it away. And this is important that people see that you have that preparedness to walk. And then most of all, that you do have the ability to close. So once you get this robustness, once all of the psych is right and the dialogue's coming out, you will find that you reach a point where you just refuse to discount because it is the last resort. I'm very big on empowering people to make that decision at the point of sale, but not at the point of listing. Okay, so the third thing we move into is proof. Once you get this right, and I know this has only been a short presentation this morning, there's going to be loads more of these to come, but with proof, we then start to have the graphic recommendations, the overwhelming quantity of property sellers only is the only thing we want to have in there. But in recommendations, you need to have an overwhelming number of them. If people can see that time and time again, hundreds, if not heading towards the thousands over a space of a company of sellers are saying that they see the value in your product, this is sufficient for people to then go, okay, this must be correct. So accolades become important, video recommendations, evidence where you're showing what market value was achieved by way of against comparative value. So if you show the comparative value and people see that you achieved a price that's higher than that, I then look at them and say, how did this cost anything? It was actually an investment. And then when you move into planning your fee day, it's pretty simple. I say that if you make this decision, don't just go and try and do it tomorrow, you'll get killed, but you need to put a plan together. If you're a team watching this, I can honestly tell you it would probably take about 6 months before you made significant moves. You then have to, once you put that plan in place, rigorously train. The most important thing I did with my team all the way back before the turn of the millennium when fees were deregulated, we had 6 months notice. And we trained on this every week before we decided to put the fee up. We did that successfully and never reduced a fee. And once you have that plan, once you have the training and understanding that in training, and it's the most important thing to see, in your planning, seek to improve, not change. So change is a scary word. Set your fee benchmark. So just set your fee and say, that is the benchmark and I'm not going to go below it. Schedule events, eventual milestones. This is the point we need to reach before we reach this point, and perhaps then when we're skilled and ready, we might even put the fee up. Alter your agency agreement so that the fee is tucked in tightly there, pre-written. Now, I don't know if this is still the same, but I used to see this all the time where agencies, they would write the fee in on the dotted line. Well, I actually developed our own agency agreements and it was squeezed up so it looked like you couldn't change it and it was rigid. It's the most important thing. Rigorously train, I say learning is not earning. So stop focusing on this idea that you learn something and you're earning. That's just not true. The earn comes from the training, from monotonous recalibration, from monotonous rehearsal time and time again. And practice perfection. Perfect practice makes perfect. And then last but not least, stop hemorrhaging. If you have a leak now, pick that benchmark and just refuse to go below it. That stops the hemorrhage, that stops the precedence, which can be dangerous. And then basically establish your advantage inside the market. So figure out what your advantage is and link that directly to the fee that you are then asking for. So that's the first taste. There's lots more to come on fee negotiation. I ask that you subscribe. If you jump onto YouTube, Mark Dwyer Sales Trainer, look it up. Give me a subscription. Cost nothing, and you'll be receiving these videos with great regularity. I thank you very much for listening to Sales Trainer Online, and I hope to see you in a couple of weeks' time with the next installment.